Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 90th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I'm Brian Emhauser, and it has been a minute since we've had a chance to catch up with all of you. We have a lot to cover tonight. Taking a couple weeks off, some of it intentional, some of it just honestly a lot going on at work. So appreciate your patience while we kind of get ourselves organized for what is going to be a absolutely pivotal offseason for the Seahawks franchise. A lot to tackle, a lot to cover. And we're going to start with that tonight. We are going to start talking about free agent priorities. We're going to start talking about draft priorities. We're going to talk about who maybe the Seahawks should let walk, who shouldn't be on this roster anymore. I think we should spend a little time talking about where we think there's some emerging strengths, players that could be give us reason why we don't need to acquire more talent at that position. So we'll see how the conversation goes. We are, as usual, working through some Canadian technical difficulties. So you may see Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter come in and out. He might try to talk. Nothing may happen. You know, he may be upside down. We have no idea what's going to happen with Jeff. It's always a world of wonders. But please bear with us as you do. And before I bring the rest of the guys into the show, thank you guys for what's been a terrific season. Continue to do fantastic fundraising on patreon.com/hawkblogger. We're on our way to, it's really like April, May when we do our donation every year. And I think we're on track to do 20,000 again, which would be great. And you guys are, the reason that happens. So really, really appreciate joining up there. And like I've said before, we'll try to see if we can do some kind of off-season get together. Maybe it's around the draft. Maybe we can find a bar in Seattle or somewhere we can, people have asked if we would do a live draft show. That would be fun. Have some reaction and get some beers. So I think those are all things that we could do, but joining up at patreon.com/hawkblogger is a big way to help support that and be included in those types of things. And then if you haven't already, subscribe, for God's sakes. Click subscribe on YouTube. Let you know when there's new videos from here, from Cable Thanos. Will at Rain City Series, I'm hopeful he's working on a pretty fun one right now. We had some ideas a few days ago, inspired by our friends down south in the Bay Area. So please subscribe. Please let people know. We really love having you guys building the community. So with that, let me bring in our amazing crew. You have got Andy Reid and his grandson, Nathan Ernst, at Nathan E11 on Twitter. How's it going, Nathan?
Good. With a great Super Bowl. My buddy, my grandpa, Andy Reid, finally got out of the ring. Everything's good.
I was happy for Andy Reid. It's been a long time coming, and it's great because, what it took nerds 40 years to realize, Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense is known, since the early 80s. So it's great that finally, Andy Reid has been validated as doing what we all knew made sense all along.
Now, if we can just get Pete to catch up to the 1980s, doing business.
And then we've got Evan Hill at Evan in S. What are you at now? Evan in SEA?
Yes, sir. It has remained that handle for a while now since the 49ers have been fairly quiet. Their fans have been fairly quiet recently, so the handle remains.
Do you have any idea why they've been quiet lately?
I can think of 10 reasons.
I'm thinking about how daring to be in my comments right now, knowing the potential ramifications. They may have lost a football game on Sunday. They won the game for the first 3.5 quarters of the game. But the last 0.5 quarters of the game didn't exactly go their way. And frankly, it was one of the most botched, choked Super Bowls in recent memory for me. This is it was just a delight. Like I cannot tell you how happy I am right now. I'm overjoyed. I'm relieved. I'm ecstatic. And, at the end of the day, who doesn't love seeing their division rivals, choke away Super Bowls 2 years in a row? So I'm very happy on my end.
What's funny is there's like a whole group of folks that actually adhere to the philosophy that, hey, you want the team that beats you, or you're right, like to actually be the team that wins because it validates. I don't follow that logic. I'm like, having the team that won your division win a Super Bowl historically has not been a particularly good thing for the rest of the teams in that division. Having that team lose the Super Bowl has historically been a pretty damn good thing for the rest of the teams in that division. If you're a Seahawks fan, I don't know how any way that you could come to the logic of cheering for the 49ers in that game.
Did you encounter some fans that took that position?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, wow.
So I subscribe to this, like I subscribe to this had it been like the Packers or the Eagles, right?
Okay, so you're referring to like the NFC in general, not the NFC West.
Right. But now if it comes to someone in the NFC West, hell no. I don't want them to have anything good or nice. But like the idea that it would have reflected well on Seattle if Green Bay hadn't turned around and got trounced by the Niners, I buy into that.
Yeah. I could follow that. So one thing that people may be wondering if we're going to talk about, and I'll cover it right away, is 40,000 words later of Pete Carroll articles. We will not be getting into Pete Carroll in any real depth today. I think it's pretty clear where the lines are drawn. Anything that goes wrong with the team at all while Pete Carroll's here, Nathan and Evan, it'll be Pete's fault. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's no reason to have the conversation.
I went to In-N-Out tonight. The fries were a little less than heavenly. You know who I blamed? Pete Carroll.
Exactly. And that does not mean that the reasons aren't valid. But it's very clear that that's the general point of view. I will probably have different reasons why things go wrong. There will be times where it will be Pete Carroll, and there will be times it will be other things. So, as far as do I think that the team needs, has a reason to change coaches right now? I laid that out in that article. So if you haven't already read the article that I wrote and Nathan's retort, I highly recommend you do. For me, I want that to mostly be my final words on the topic, and to move on to how do we win with the regime we've got, regardless of your point of view on whether that should be the regime. Let's try to win with the team we got, and not spend all the time figuring out how we do something that is not, we have no real chance of changing. So with that in mind, this is really the offseason episode. So I gave the guys some assignments. I don't know if anyone actually went and followed their instructions, but it's okay, because if they didn't, they're going to have to think quickly. I would highly recommend pulling up websites with top NFL free agents, so you're ready for questions on those. And let's start a little bit with looking inward. What do you guys see as, of the positions groups on the Seahawks? And if you want to get to specific positions, quarterback, we know we don't necessarily need another quarterback, although I wouldn't mind drafting one. But let's say we don't need another quarterback. What are the areas of this team that are in good shape, that you feel like are trending positively, that are not top priorities to bring in free agents or draft to augment? Like, what if any parts of the team do you feel like, yeah, if we went into next season with basically the same group we've got there, I'd feel okay?
I guess I'll go ahead and start with the obvious one, or maybe it's not the obvious one. I feel very confident in the safety group, and I've said it all year long for the most part. Well, especially when we, receive Quandre Diggs, and pretty much balled out the rest of the year. I think with Quandre Diggs at free safety, Bradley McDougald at strong safety, you got Marquise Blair, who was the second round pick from last year. Got minimal playing time this year, but I think, we witnessed that whole debacle with veteran playing time and Pete Carroll's preference over, who started at the position and everything like that. And we debated it for a long time, but I do think Marquise Blair is going to be an emerging player for this defense come 2020. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up actually starting over Bradley McDougald. Bradley McDougald is still a really good player. He wasn't as good as he was in 2018, but I do think Marquise Blair has the much higher ceiling. Obviously, the youthful energy. He's younger, harder hitting football player. Really the traits you look for and want in a strong safety. So my answer to your question, Brian, is the safety group. I am not going to expand that category to the DBs in general because I have concerns about the corners, but I am confident in our safeties.
Nathan, how about you? Any position groups that jump off the list?
Quarterback seems all right. I think they're pretty
Talked
good.
about that. Yep.
There are position groups I will be okay with going into next year with. I don't know that there are any that I can't see them finding ways to improve. I guess maybe linebacker is one where I just don't see them needing to spend there between how well KJ played, Bobby being Bobby, having a couple guys behind him with Barton, and who knows what BBK maybe can do someday. So and with just a general I really hope that they play a lot less base next year. I don't think linebacker is a spot they need to really do anything with.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about linebacker, to be honest. that position group feels like it could fall off a cliff if Bobby's level of play continues to decline, and KJ is already I think we got one more year out of him than I expected to at a decent level. And I don't know that we know that Cody Barton and Ben Burke-Irvin are going to be starting caliber. I think we're hopeful on Barton, but I would not be a fan of spending free agent dollars on linebackers for sure. But if they drafted a young linebacker, I wouldn't bat an eye at that.
Yeah, but I mean, that is true of every position group outside of quarterback. And even quarterback, if they spend a 5th or 6th round pick, I won't bat an eye at that either, right? So
I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's another position group that's super strong, but I think we'd all agree wouldn't mind seeing more addition to it, and that's receiver. I mean, you've got Lockett, you've got Metcalf, young, ascending, quality players. There are some depth guys that are quality depth guys. I don't know that we joke about Malik Turner and other fun stuff, but those guys are, number 4, maybe to top out at number 3 receivers. That's a strong group. If they went into the season with the same group next year, I'd be a little disappointed, but I don't think it would be major alarm bells from my perspective. But we'll get into that from draft perspective because there's some pretty appealing options there too. Jeff, are you with us on the phone here?
I am. I'm with you guys. I've been listening.
So the question was, we went through some different position groups that we think are in decent shape that would not be our top priorities to address. And obviously quarterback was in there. Evan mentioned safety. I'd agree with him on that. Nathan mentioned linebacker, I think. I called out wide receiver. Obviously it's a little nuanced. Any other position groups? What about something like running back? We're dealing with some injuries there. Do you feel like you want to see the team add to that pile, or do you feel comfortable with the state of that position?
I think when you guys were on the phone, I was on the phone, you guys were talking, I was going through each position group on the RLAT's depth chart, and really there really isn't much that you feel comfortable with going into the year. And you mentioned receiver, that would be fine at the top end of it, but depth was an issue for them, and one Lockett injury really set them back down the stretch. So I would be really disappointed if they don't address this group, especially in this receiver draft class, which we'll get into later. Looking at all the other position groups, the only one really I'm comfortable with is running back. And you have two of the main guys coming off injury. Travis Homer looked okay in his role. I think those are your 3 running backs next year. Yeah, maybe you send a late round pick on it, but outside of running backs, they need to address most of these position groups, and some of them pretty drastically. Like defensive line needs a pretty big adjustment. Some spots on the O-line, almost everywhere. Nickelback they need. Cornerback is not comfortable at all with Trey Flowers and nickelback. So other than linebacker, which they are getting a little old, other than Cody Barton, there's not much you're truly comfortable with other than running back, which is probably the least important position group on the team. And I guess punter? Is that their only good position group? I don't know.
I don't know.
Do we even consider Michael Dixon to be like a top league-wide punter anymore?
He was middle of the pack last year.
Yes, he was. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Oh,
we
we've talked
can.
about it plenty, man. I mean, he was.
No, I meant just the fan base in general. He's a beloved player, and I don't think like what do you say in 2018 he was like a top 3, like top 4 punter, and this year he took a sizable drop. I feel like
he did. That, yeah, he definitely did. Well, so then let's approach it this way. Each of you get to pick one position group, one that is the one that you want to improve the most. And it can be the same position group. You guys can all pick the same one. And the follow-on question is, what are your top 2 moves to address that position group? What do you want to see happen? We're gonna start that way, and then we'll broaden out a little bit more. So, Nathan, do you have an idea of what your top position group is that you want to see improve this year for the Seahawks?
Nathan, you're muted.
Nathan?
Let me find my mute button. For me, I think it's cornerback. I think they have no nickelback on the roster, at least nothing that's close to being proven or anything you're close to, just rolling in the next season with. Trey had a down sophomore year, and the depth there isn't, at the boundary spots isn't anything to write home about. So I think that's the one I want to see them improve the most. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about pass rush, and I'm not against adding there, but I do kind of buy into the idea that maybe coverage is more important than pass rush. And so I think that's where I want to see them focus.
Okay. And what would be a move or 2 that you'd like to see them make to help improve the cornerback spot?
I mean, they'll draft a couple guys in the mid round. I'm okay with that. One of the guys, I think the big cornerback name out there is Chris Harris. I'd be fine with that. But I was kind of looking through some of the free agents and trying to find a name that's maybe a little bit more of a bargain guy. And I was looking at Bradley Roby. He's a guy that Seahawks were rumored to be interested in the draft, which was surprising because he was a first-round pick. And who knows if there's anything to that or not. I think he checks a lot of their boxes. I think he's played some nickel, so I think he's got some versatility there. So I think he could be a guy that could be one of those kind of Pete Carroll turnaround stories.
I had Bradley Roby on my list for the record, so that's a good call out.
Yeah, I don't know much about Roby. A nickel corner or outside corner?
No, he's an outside guy. I think Denver drafted him 1 pick before them, I think the year after the Super Bowl. And he was in Houston last year. He's a bigger, more outside physical guy. He's still, I think, under 30. He was a first-round pick. I had him on my list with Byron Jones, so I think that's a good call-out.
Yeah, he'll be 28 next year. Are you sure that he hasn't played any nickel? I thought he played a little bit on the inside. Maybe
a little bit, but they had him and Harris and Talib in Denver, and Harris would move inside, and him and Talib would play outside.
Gotcha.
Well, Nathan, it's interesting. You quickly got off of Chris Harris, and you said you're basically looking for a bargain. This team doesn't need to be bargain shopping necessarily. If you said pass rush maybe isn't your top priority, coverage is, why not go in and get a guy like Chris Harris, address your nickel spot. He can play outside in base and he can slide inside, and you've got other guys that can step in and play outside when he moves inside.
I don't have any problem with it. I just was trying to look past some of the bigger name guys. Also, he's 30. I mean, what will he be? He'll be 31 next year. So I don't know like what kind of contract he's going to get, how much they really want to pay him. So, yeah, I mean, I think he'd be a great fit for all the reasons that you just said. But I think Roby's a guy that they could really realistically just like set their sights on and kind of, get at a price that's pretty reasonable and stuff.
All right. So it sounds like, primarily, well, you mentioned draft, but like, would you primarily want to see them address that position through free agency or draft?
That's a good question. I don't think I have a preference. I think I would like both is really the thing.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be either or. But if I had to pick one, I don't think I have a preference either way, really. And that's without knowing a ton about this class. Maybe if I understood the class a little better, maybe it'd be a good one or a bad one. I don't know. So
yeah, I think it's interesting with Trey Flowers. The fan base in general is kind of split a little bit when it comes to Flowers, and I think there's folks that feel like, hey, he's perfectly good, and let's just keep rolling with him. He'll keep improving, and he's doing pretty good for a safety converted to corner. I think there's that group of folks, and then there's another group of folks that are like, I don't care what he's converted to what. He's not been that great. Like, he's been a average to below average corner, and we need to do better at that position. And I think people probably left the last few games of the season with a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth. I don't think that he played as well at the end. There was a stretch where he was playing some of his best football and he trailed off. So I think we said on our offseason show last year, I mean, even in the article we wrote together, if they stood pat at the corner position last year, I was going to be really disappointed. Pretty much stood pat at the cornerback position. In fact, they went backwards, losing Justin Coleman, and I think that was a big issue for them this year. So I agree with you. I think they need to add to the competition there. I think status quo with Flowers and Shaquille Griffin is not a recipe for success. And I don't know if they'll go after Chris Harris, but I think that's an interesting one. Since we're on this topic of corners and Nathan picked it, anybody else have corners that they're particularly interested in on the free agent market?
I mean,
I do.
Byron Jones is the hot
that
name.
was my guess.
Dallas free agent, super high ceiling, effective in man and zone coverage. Most people currently consider him like a top 10, top 15 corner. He hasn't played excellent all 4 years, but he's one of those players where coming out of college, just a sky high ceiling. And, he could be one of those guys that comes into a Pete Carroll system and immediately turns into, like, what's that corner that joined New England? He's got the dreads, Stephen Gilmore. Like, he was excellent in Buffalo, but really reached new heights in New England. I think, on the money side, he's going to cost some buco bucks. I think we're talking, I'm hesitant to say 16 mil APY because I think that sounds way too cheap. I think I could see him hitting like 17 or 18, maybe 19. Corner is a hot, positional market. It's hard to find good corners. And obviously, like Nathan said, I think coverage is extremely valuable. So it's definitely a hot name that I think many, many teams will be interested in.
Jeff, you had some thoughts on Byron Jones?
Yeah, I think Evan hit some of the best points, but I think with him, the reason Seattle doesn't typically sign corners off free agency is because their technique is really challenging to teach to a lot of players. And Byron Jones played the last couple of years with Chris Richard, who does the step kick in Dallas. And they use the same defensive technique, so there's no learning curve. Someone like Chris Harris, who's been playing a really different technique, someone like him might have trouble adjusting to the way Seattle asks defensive backs to play. So I think that's what makes Jones so appealing. It's a natural transition for him, playing from Chris Richard as their defensive coordinator the last 2 years. You're not asking him to do something he's never done before. And then that moves Trey Flowers down to kind of what Akeem King was playing this year. That really makes you a lot stronger. And he's a good age. He's going to cost a lot, but I think that allows you to hit that nickel corner position in the draft. And you can really lock down those two offensive or defensive outside positions. And I know it'll cost a lot, but I think that's a kind of free agent based on his age and skill set that would make sense to target.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that, and it makes a lot of sense. I think Byron Jones has definitely kind of underperformed his draft status to some extent, but I can understand people being interested. What about names like, Logan Ryan? Is that a guy? He's older. He's going to be 29 next year, but is one of those longer, lankier corners. Played in New England. Any interest there?
Sorry, I missed it. Who'd you say?
Logan Ryan. I see Ryan as being a guy that is old enough that he shouldn't get top dollar, but has played in some quality defenses over the years. I think he's definitely someone who could challenge Trey Flowers and probably take over there. Challenge with a guy like Logan Ryan is that he's not going to play nickel at all. And so, one of your questions you've got to ask here is are you prioritizing finding a solution at nickel, or are you trying to add the best corner possible? And I think if they go into the season without a solution at nickel, that's a major problem. And I think that the one thing I would say is you got Ugo Amadi, who honestly has not proven himself at all. He's shown some promise, but if you added another good corner and you had, said, okay, we're going to bet on Ugo Amadi, I could kind of at least buy that on the upside that you could end up, if Amadi pans out, you could end up with two improved positions in the secondary. So I think that's one of the things that John Schneider is going to have to think about this offseason is, if you had to pick one, what are you going to make? That's why Chris Harris is so appealing, because he covers you on both spots, and there's a real chance basically either Trey Flowers really improves or Amadi works out. Either way, Chris Harris complements. It makes it really interesting.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this name, but did you mention Ronald Darby from the Eagles, the former UW guy? I think UW, right? Ronald Darby?
I don't think he played.
No, he went to Florida State.
He's a potential option. I think that could be, he's struggled with injuries his entire career, but high ceiling. Could be a Pete Carroll type of guy, very buy low type of thing. I'm sure it wouldn't be more than like $1 million or $2 million on a 1-year deal.
And there's a couple other names like him out there. Trey Waynes is a free agent. He was a first top 15 pick. Eli Apple was a first round pick. Mackenzie Alexander, he's a slot guy. He was a first round or second round pick. There's some really decent names out there for value corners if they kind of want to hedge Trey Flowers and go into the draft with more options than nickel.
Yeah, there's some folks that were in the chat talking about going out and getting Xavier Rhodes.
Yeah, he's going to get cut for sure, but he had a terrible year and he's descending. So I don't know if that's a guy you want to invest in.
No, thank you.
A lot of these guys are like Darby's a nickel guy. I don't know much about Mackenzie Alexander. A lot of these guys are much more outside than inside types.
Yeah, there are not. That's the thing. It's not a deep free agent class for corners, which means that any of them that are at all good are going to cost a boatload. So, I think that's, unless this is the Seahawks' top priority in the offseason, I don't think they're going to get any of the top guys. And so, one thing is what we think is their top priority, and we'll move on to the next position group in a second here, but I don't believe that either John Schneider or Pete Carroll believe cornerback is their top priority to solve. So it's just hard for me to imagine them going out and getting a Chris Harris, although, I certainly wouldn't be upset to see it happen. I think we might see trade might be a reasonable option to look at here. And That's obviously impossible to predict. I mean, you have to go through and look at cap situations and analyze that a little bit more, but that might be something that they look at doing. They've done that before each of the last couple of seasons in terms of trying to fill some of their corner roles. So let's move on. Jeff, pick one position group that you'd want to improve, and a couple moves that come to mind of how you'd want to improve it.
Is that just for free agency, or is that overall?
It can be, this is overall. Like, pick your position group you want to improve, and pick your tactic that you'd want to use to improve it.
Okay, I'm going to go a little off the board. I'll leave you guys the obvious one. The area I would like to see them improve is right tackle. And I don't want to see them address that in the draft. I would like to see them use free agency to stabilize that position. And if you watch the Chiefs play, or you're looking at Nathan's background right now, the highest graded PFF player in the playoffs was Mitchell Schwartz, a guy that Brian really advocated for the Seahawks to sign. I think with Nick Bosa in your division, Donald, and all these guys, I think we've talked so much for years about Jermaine Ifedi and his issues. And I know there's George Fan, but asking a guy to switch sides is really challenging. I look at free agency and I see Brian Bulaga out there. I think he's a guy, and if you read Ben Baldwin's Twitter at all this year, he talked a lot about Aaron Rodgers and a lot about the number one pass protecting team in the NFL. Brian Bulaga was a bookend on that team, and he was a first-round talent. He's a really good player. He's a little older, but you can be a little older. And if you're going to try to pass more, you're going to try to compete in this division with these really talented defensive lines of Chandler Jones and all these guys. If you can stabilize right tackle with a Bulaga or a Jack Conklin, who's 25, he's more of the Seahawks type of guy because he's a run blocker. I prefer the pass blocker. I'll leave the obvious answer to this question for you guys. So I think that's an area where I really see an area where I'd like to see him address in free agency, not the draft, not deal with kind of a learning curve. I want someone who can play now, kind of fits with Russell Wilson's prime. We've talked so much about their pass protection issues, and they dropped the 30th in the league this year. I think that will really help your passing game. I think that will really help just stabilize Russell Wilson and kind of put him in a position to be maximized. And I know we will talk about pass rushers in a bit, and watching the Super Bowl, it's hard not to look at Nick Bosa and Chris Jones and see the impact they have. But again, look at Mitchell Schwartz, look at Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. I think that's a huge position for them. I'd love to see Jermaine Ifedi walk in. I want to see them really stabilize that position.
Jeff, I am so upset right now. You stole my favorite. I think my favorite outside free agent pick that I was hoping the Seahawks would pursue. That is Jack Conklin. Can I follow up on just? I'm gonna follow up on your answer, Jeff. Just since we have the same position group, surprise, surprise, it's a line. I 100% agree with Jeff. I think they should have let Ifedi walk. He was ranked like, let me see if I have it up. Like Jack Conklin was ranked as the 12th best tackle in 2019, just as a grade per Pro Football Focus for you. Jermaine Ifedi was obviously a complete disaster. He ranked 79th overall among tackles. So that is not great news for Jermaine Ifedi. But I'll choose a different position. I think right guard. DJ Fluker had a low-key, really bad year. And it was year one of his 2-year new deal. And 2020 is the last year of that second-year deal. DJ Fluker had a rough year. He struggled with injuries. He wasn't that good in either run blocking or in pass protection. There's a couple of right guard names that could definitely be a big improvement. You've got Joe Thuney from the Patriots. He ended as Pro Football Focus's third best guard in 2019. Did you hear that? Third best guard in 2019. Excellent pass protector, great in run blocking, but probably a better pass blocker. So that's a little discouraging if you're hoping that the Seahawks pursue him. He could be an immediate upgrade. He's an all-pro level type of talent. You've got Brandon Scherf. He is a little bit of in a different situation since he has struggled with injuries throughout his career. So he's missed like 15 games in the past 3 years. So that's quite a bit of time missed. But if you could do a sort of deal that is playtime incentive based, I think upgrading the right side of the O-line is a big priority for this offense. Like Jeff said, right tackle.
It's pretty straightforward there, Evan. I mean, if I'm looking at this right, you've got both Jamarcus Webb and Ode Ibushi available. They're just out there for the taking, and you're set.
Are you trying to hurt me right now? You trying to hurt me?
No, but it's funny. I mean, offensive line, I think we'd all agree. Like, this is the one that the team could royally F up. Like, right? Like, this is the year to remake this line.
There is talent. They have the cap space, and I don't think anybody on this podcast trusts this team to scout, identify, and develop offensive line talent. Are we all in agreement?
I really have my biggest concern. Like, I think this is my biggest concern with how they could approach this offseason is that they're going to keep Justin Britt. Like, if I just pick one move that I think is just a fulcrum for how this offseason will go, it is if you cut Justin Britt, you get $9 million in cap space or somewhere around there. If you keep him, you get a average, maybe slightly above average center. And I'm telling you, that is a make or break move from my perspective. I can think of a lot better ways to spend $9 million in cap space than spend it on Justin Britt this year. And I mean, that's a huge decision, and they don't have to make it. And that's why my concern is that they're not, that they're going to stick with what they've got, which that's $9 million out of the cap space that we could have had to spend elsewhere. Then on top of that, the next thing that would be like a nail in the coffin would be re-signing Germain Ifedi. I'm hoping against hope that somebody gives him a contract. The Seahawks, so far, the Seahawks have never signed a first-round pick that they have not tendered a fifth-year option to. That has not happened so far. I'm hoping that they follow suit again and let Germain Ifedi walk, because there are really good options in the free agency market, both older and younger, that all are appealing. I mean, you guys covered some of them, but I mean, there are plenty of reasonable options out there. I won't go through all of them again. I'd be fine if they signed George Fant to play right tackle. Like, that to me would be a meaningful improvement over someone like Germain Ifedi. So
what's your price? What's your limit on Fant?
Well, look, you're going to have to spend at the right tackle position to get somebody. I think, I mean, check me if I'm pulling this out a little bit, but I think right tackle, to find someone who's a starter for under $10 million a year is probably going to be tough unless you're taking a real risk on somebody. And I'm thinking that someone like Ifedi, who's been a starter, he may require like 14 to 16. I don't know.
Yeah, we need to stop on this for a second. So for those that are listening and are unaware, the right tackle market is bloated as hell. Literally, if you have a pulse and you've been a first round pick or a second round pick or a starter, you're right off the bat making like 12, 13 million a year. So I could totally see,
Right?
Oh, it 100% is. That right tackle for the Broncos just got paid $13 million a year. Trent Brown, who got switched to right tackle for the Raiders, is making like $17.5 million a year. There's a few contracts I'm not thinking of, but the right tackle market.
The top three, but like, I think L. Collins signed pretty recently, didn't he?
Yep, for $10 million.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Going through here. I don't know. I mean, there are only 5 right tackles right now making more than 10 million or more. Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, this stuff resets every year. So like it'll go up, but
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know if that's right.
I'm saying the recent.
Go ahead, Evan. This is your area of expertise.
I'm just saying the recent right tackle contracts have reset those salary expectations for those players. Historically, yes, the right tackle market has not been some explosive salary, position group, but the recent deals are paying some players that just aren't so great and, have a pulse.
Well, let me be clear. I would rather pay a Jack Conklin or a Brian Bulaga $10 to $12 million a year to play right tackle than get some great deal at George Fant at $7 million a year. Like, if that's where the market goes, like, I'd rather them get a great starting caliber tackle that we can, rely on for a while. But like, I mean, if the market ends up being 7 or 8 million for Fant, and that's where you end up, I'd be okay if you also cut Justin Britt and you're looking at spending some of that money elsewhere. And I think don't re-sign Mike Iupati. Like,
so I have a question for you then, Brian.
Yeah.
I want to pose a situation for you. You've got George Fant. I think let's say I actually don't think he's going to get close to 10. Let's say he gets $7 million a year, 3 years, $7 million a year. So $21 million deal over 3 years. Would you take that deal, or would you take Jack Conklin at, like, say, I think we need to be aggressive about this, like $16, $17 million a year for 3 years. So what is that, like $48 million over 3 years? Do you see my situation?
I do. It's obviously hard to do in isolation without looking at the other moves, because we haven't gotten to defensive line yet.
Sure.
And I think the Seahawks, I mean, that's my area that I'd pick on. And I think the Seahawks have to add 2 players.
But if we're talking about those 2 moves in a vacuum, which risk are you taking, or I guess which player are you picking?
Well, let me back out this way. I mean, I feel like cornerback, that's a great call out. Defensive line and offensive line. Those are the places where I feel like the team really needs to show some improvement. And I think they need to do it through free agency or trade. I think they need veteran help. Like, I don't think there's not a lot of examples of, unless you're at the top of the draft, rookie pass rushers coming in and just taking over right away. That doesn't happen that often. Even Frank Clark, those guys took a few years. So I think you got to spend. I mean, I'm thinking you got to get 2 of, like, Yannick and Clowney, and we'll go over some of those names in a second, but I think you got to get 2 of those guys. That's going to be a buku investment. And then from there, if I was to go downward, I would prioritize offensive line over corner. If I had to choose between Jack Conklin and Chris Harris, I would choose Jack Conklin.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of of the same mind, really. I mean, it's especially the whole pass rushers take a little while thing. Like, to me, I want them to. I think cornerback might be more important than defensive line, but I think I would rather them spend on defensive line than cornerback, just because of their ability to. They've developed some talent there. They've got a knack for that. So, and just the time it takes players to be able to step in and play at those different positions. So, yeah, I mean, if you're looking to win now, and this team should be looking to win now within reason, and I think spending, on Conklin and Ngakoue makes more sense than throwing a bunch of money at Chris Harris, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
does that answer your question, Evan?
Yep.
I totally agree with you guys. When I made my offseason plan today, the 2 areas I said, don't spend free agent money on the lines, get guys who are ready to play. Those have the biggest learning curve, and use the draft to get speed. And I think the way free agency sets up, that works out very well with their money. I think they can use those high picks instead of trying to develop a right tackle and taking 3 years. I think you can use guys to just get speed on the field, whether that's receiver or other positions. And I think they're in a window where they need to win now. Russell's 31 years old, and Pete's in the last 2 years of his contract. Well, obviously within reason, but I think you have to look at players who can play now, and the best spots to do that historically are offensive line, defensive line.
I'm curious though for you guys, because this is critical. I mean, off-season makeup stuff on the offensive line. You do have some pieces that are young and showed promise. You have Jamarco Jones, you have Phil Haynes. Yes, it was one game, but he did play well in a tight spot, and I think there's reason to expect he'll be better next year. And I'm probably forgetting a couple guys because my brain's not been in this for a few weeks. But I mean, at least those two guys I think could be legit starters next year. And they're young. Where do you deploy them? You know, Haynes even could play center. They started cross training him at that position. Ethan Posick, I'd throw in there as well. If you went into the season with Jamarco Jones, Phil Haynes as starters, and Ethan Posick or Joey Hunt at center, where are you most worried?
Joey Hunt at center would have me worried. But yeah, no, I think rolling with Jones and Haynes is actually fine. I mean, you probably want to try to keep Upati or someone like that around just as kind of a cheap, capable player.
Upati had a good year, mind you. He really did.
Yeah, he wasn't bad at all.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm being dead serious. Pro Football Focus graded him exceptionally well. I'm pretty sure about that. You can double check me, Brian.
Exceptionally well might be an exaggeration, but
yeah, I think he was solid.
I don't remember a lot of games where I was like, "Oh, Upati's a problem," right? And yeah, he made $2.5 million, right? If you can get him back at that number again, and then you just kind of roll with him and the two young guys, I think that
he was the 48th rated guard
overall.
Yeah.
Where was he in pass pro or in run blocking?
Oh, he was the consummate average. He was 60.3 overall, 60.1 pass blocking, and 60.3 run blocking.
Oh my God. Did he have like a stretch or something that distorted my memory? Or do I just have a bad memory?
Look,
he had highlights.
None of us expected Upati and Fluker to play a full season, and they basically did. I mean, they missed some time, but for the most part, they played a full season. That was the biggest upset. And Upati, I think, definitely outplayed Fluker and was a big part of some of the bigger run plays that they had. Good seal blocks on a lot of situations, kick out blocks, those kind of things. So he was a contributor. That's fine. I'd be so disappointed if they go and bring him back. Honestly, like I think that's capping the potential of that position. I would much rather see a young player step into that guard spot. But
we've seen what? Have we seen 5 combined games from Jamarco Jones and Phil Haynes?
No.
So like I don't
Jamarco Jones we have.
Like 5 starts?
He's close to that.
He might be right at 5.
Yeah.
Okay. But regardless, like I don't want them to hand Upati a starting job, but I don't want them to hand any of these guys a starting job. So you give 3 guys that, you know, one of them's a vet you're comfortable with, and 2 of them are young guys that you're hopeful for, and you see what shakes out.
Yeah, I mean,
and also considering, you know, we're talking about them signing Chris Harris and Byron Jones and Yannick Ngakoue and Jack Conklin, right? Like at some point the money runs out. So what position do you spend on?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's what I'm kind of getting at here is I think you can get some cheap veterans. I would not necessarily pick the guy that is run centric and Upati. And I'm a little surprised that's where you guys would go. I mean, I think the question is if I'm like criticizing myself on this or like looking at it, yeah, you cut Justin Britt, you've got Ethan Posick and Joey Hunt. Those are your 2 options at center, or Phil Haynes. Those are pretty much your options. You look at the
good draft for centers too.
There's not a good option at center. I mean, Ryan Khalil is 35. But I think what you end up doing, there are some decent centers in the draft. I think you could go center in the draft. And I'm saying it on live Real Hawk Talk. I would roll with Ethan Posick and Joey Hunt and a young draft pick at the center spot in order to fund these other needs. I would take risk at that center spot.
You're ready to cut.
Have that down on my offseason plan, Brian.
What's that, Jeff?
I have that exact scenario down in my offseason plan. Move on from Britt. Use Ethan Posick as your draft hedge and use one of their first 4 picks on a center. There's some good centers in this draft. I think that's looking at their cap today. Justin Britt's name stood out. Unless they can restructure his deal, I think you have to reallocate that money to either right tackle or defense.
What are you reacting to, Evan?
I'm just like kind of shocked by this. Like I understand the cap reasoning and the hints in his contract as to why you might want to cut Justin Britt, but like, did we forget how bad Joey Hunt was this year? Like he was a disaster. Like I think he was a disaster. I do not think he was average. Like I think he was below average.
Yeah, he was bad.
I think he struggled badly.
We don't want Joey Hunt to play.
But
Joey Hunt's your third string option in this scenario.
But your faith to replace him with either Ethan Posick or somebody in the draft seems a little optimistic for my taste.
I mean, you got to be optimistic at some point, like in the NFL, like with the cap and everything. At some point, you just have to say, I sure hope these young guys work out, right? I mean, there's no team that doesn't say that somewhere.
Yeah, what part of the thing of roster building is projection. And when the Seahawks moved on from Lawyer Malloy to start the 5th round Cam Chancellor, that was a pretty big leap. And that's kind of how you just have to do things.
And I think Evan, I think people really overrate Justin Britt. Like
I don't disagree though.
But let me tell you though, like Justin Britt, he played 8 games. His Pro Football Focus ranking was 62 overall. Joey Hunt's 56.5.
Totally.
Not great, but
totally.
$9 million of cap. Am I willing to risk that on like just to make sure that we get that much of a difference? Hell no. I will take. People can say it's crazy. People have said a lot of things I say are crazy. I will go out there. I think Ethan Posick, if he can play, we don't know what his injury situation is. I think he played center in college. He was a high pick. I think he was showing some promise. I think he could be someone who's actually better at center than he was at other positions. I don't think it's the worst idea to say roll the dice with those 2. Add a young player that might work out well, and you've got Phil Haynes that's already cross-trained a little bit at center if you need to go there. But I would apply Phil Haynes to guard. I'd apply him to left guard. I would consider having Jamarco Jones at right tackle because he is a tackle. He played guard. Everyone was surprised. He's a tackle by nature. I look at him at right tackle.
He did not look like a tackle by nature when he stepped in.
I know. That was bad. I'm not giving up on him there, honestly, at all. I've seen enough good things from him. I believe in him as a tackle. I really do. So, this is to me like, okay, use the $9 million from Britt, then fine. Go get me Jack Conklin for $14 million or Bulaga. Use some of that $9 million to go get me one of those guys to make bookends at tackle that you totally believe in, that you go into every game knowing that you're going to be well protected on the edges, and then put Jamarco Jones and Phil Haynes at guard, and let's figure out center. I would be all in on that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me. Like if you're telling me that they're going to cut Justin Britt and pay for 80% of Jack Conklin's salary or half a Clowney with that,
right?
Hell yeah, I'm in. Like
that's what we're talking about, dude.
But I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is I don't think they have enough cap space where they're at the point where it's not really a needed move. Like they could afford some of these big. Oh yeah.
Let's talk defensive line before you say that.
Let me tell you why. We're working with like 55 to 60 million in net cap space right now. Okay. So that's our current number. We could, pull some levers and get up to like 70 million. Everybody, when they're slotting in these contracts with like Clowney, all these other guys, they're assuming like a 24. Sorry, my dog is freaking out in the back. All these contracts are assuming like a $24 million cap hit, like year one. And it's just not accurate. These contract cap hits are gradual. That's how these things work. It's not like a $24 million cap hit in year one. So by the time Seattle has a ton of cap space, in like 2021, they'll have way more space. They can fit these guys in this year. No problem.
Well, come on though. It's not. It is not a free ride on this. So, I mean, if we talk defensive line, I mean, clearly they got to bring back Ezekiel Ansah. I mean, that's number one priority. I think we're all agreed on that. But I mean,
I want to raise.
yeah, give him a raise. There's a lot of options out there, guys. I mean, you give me two of Jadeveon Clowney, let's say Yannick Ngakoue, if I'm getting that right, and
Yeah.
Eric Armstead. Give me two of those three.
Yeah. You can
I'll
fit it
take
in.
it.
You can fit it in. I guess what my argument is, I don't think the Brit move is necessary to be able to make these moves happen. Does that make sense?
Well, so let's say it's Yannick and Clowney as two.
Sure.
Those are probably both like 20 million plus players.
Yeah, I guess like somewhere in like the $35 million range total year one cap hit.
Right.
But also with
Go ahead,
Britt's last year of his deal, right? So
Yes.
doesn't moving off for him kind of make sense now because you're.
Oh, you
You're just
totally
saying
can.
it.
You totally can.
Yeah.
The cap reasoning, you don't have to convince me on the cap reasoning. Like, it makes total sense. It kind of reminds me of the Sherman contract where you're in the last year of the deal. He's coming off like a major injury. You don't know if he's going to be the same player, although Justin Britt really wasn't ever good in the first place. But yeah, you don't have to convince me. Like, I mean, pivoting this question a little bit, do you guys see Seattle making this move? Like, yeah, it might make sense to us, but do you think Seattle will?
I don't.
Why? Why don't you think so?
Because I believe that they overvalue Justin Britt.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It feels like he's real close with Russell and John.
I mean, he looks the part. He definitely does. He's a huge dude.
He's a scary motherfucker.
But I don't know that he plays the way he looks. And I'm pretty sure he's blocked me at this point on Twitter. So, who knows? You're going to say something, Nathan.
I just can't. I have a hard time that they're going to do the math on it, and like if the question is, do you want to keep Justin Britt at $9 million a year or keep Fant at $9 million a year? Are they really going to look at that and say we want Britt? With his
Great question.
Injuries, he's not Solari's guy necessarily. Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, and this is like, we talk about the 9 million like it's just towards one player, but like,
yeah, I can go
I
anywhere.
mean, you could end up getting like every year the team gets. I mean, Bradley McDougald's been a starter for 3 years and he's cost like $2 million a year, right? So like you can get a meaningful addition. I'm looking at the defensive line, some of the free agency players there. Not all of them have to be $20 million players. Vinny Curry is he's older. He's going to be cheaper. He's a decent pass rusher. You've got Vic Beasley, who Atlanta said they're going to move on from, used to be a big sacker, definitely tailed off, should not be a huge market for him. If he's a rotational pass rusher, fine. If you're looking at him as starter, not so great. Timmy Jernigan, I think is an interesting interior defensive lineman. The guy's 27. I thought he was older, but like he's a perfectly good player. Like you go on. Vernon Butler's interesting. I think Benson Mayo is still interesting. Chris Jones certainly is interesting. I don't know how much he's going to fetch, but God, if you got Chris Jones and Clowney or
Robert Quinn's out there.
Robert Quinn, like there's a lot of defensive line names. And if you tell me we're going to be stuck spending $9 million on Justin Britt, instead of getting 2-3 deep on a defensive line that killed us last year, they freaking killed us. They killed us more than the offensive line. Tell me that the defensive line didn't kill us more than the offensive line this year.
By the end of
just watch what Chris Jones did in the Super Bowl and what Bosa did every playoff game. Those guys can wreck the game. You saw the glimpses of Clowney, but they need a lot more there. And Yeah, with Britt, it's mostly just asset allocation. It's what you guys just said. It's just you can afford to keep him, but if you can use that $9 million to get 2 to 3 players, and you can get by at center, fine. It's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, and I don't know how attached they are to Britt either. Like, they drafted Posick, who I think they had hopes he would fit some other places, maybe tackle, but he was a center. And Hunt was a guy that they actually talked up a little bit when they drafted him. He was a guy they couldn't leave the draft without, right? And so I don't know that they are super attached to Britt.
This is an interesting one we have not talked about. Interesting it's gone this long, right? Jaron Reed. Do you guys saw some of the tweets, right, around who did he call out?
Sam Gold.
I don't even really think he called him out, but he definitely was like, hey, I'm worth more than $13 to $14 million a year.
Yeah. Do any of you think he is?
He can walk out the door right now if that's his price.
Anyone disagree?
I don't know that I want to pay him that. He might be worth that though, right? Like, what are
not off the year he just had?
Well, so to define that a little bit more, Nathan, like, could he be worth that as a player? I think yes, I do. Do I think that he's got enough evidence to prove he's worth that as a player and that I'm willing to take that risk on him? I don't think so. Like, to me, Jaron Reed is the guy I go in and I make, if I'm John Schneider, I make a 1-year deal pitch, which he's done a ton of times. He said, give him 12 million, maybe give him 13 or 14 million this year, 1-year deal, to reset his market. But I am not committing to him long-term off of the year he just had.
But there's no way I'm giving a 1-year, $13 million, $14 million prove-it-year deal. There's just not off 1 year of double-digit sacks. Like, I don't think, like, 2018 for him was an anomaly to me. Do you guys genuinely expect him to have like double-digit sacks?
No, but I think 6 sacks is not unreasonable for him if he's got any semblance of a pass rush around him and he's playing a full season. I mean, you're right. Like, the number that's always been in my head is 10 million. If you gave him a 1-year, $10 million deal, we've seen that in other places. I think that's reasonable. And I don't know if he'll take it. Someone else might get foolish, but there's just so many. I mean, there are so many defensive linemen on the market. Ashawn Robinson. I could just literally list names all night. It is such a good class.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, are any of you going to have FOMO if Jaron Reed moves on?
Not if it's in that teens range.
I don't know what that means.
Are you going to have regrets?
We are missing out. I see. No, I will not have that. I will be FOMO free.
FOMO free. I like that. All right. So interesting. Yeah. I mean, other guys on the Seahawks we haven't talked about there. We won't go through obviously everybody, but Quentin Jefferson's also a free agent. I'm assuming we're fine with him moving on. He's also a guy I'd be fine to bring back on a cheap deal if we get a bunch of the other pieces.
I really want Quentin Jefferson back.
Okay, why?
I think he has a high ceiling. I know he struggled with injuries.
High ceiling? How high?
I really think so. Like, he has struggled with. Yes, he'll always be a rotational player, but like, he made an impact. He was an impact player this year. Like, yeah, we don't have a ton of defense.
I wanted to know what you meant by high ceiling. So
okay,
a quality rotational player.
Yes, that's what my expectations are for him, like relative to draft position and everything like that.
So he's got a high ceiling similar to Malik Turner's.
Yeah.
Turner really went downhill after that video.
Yeah, who bought that?
That was Jeff.
That was me. I cost the Seahawks.
It's all right. It's all right.
It seems like we're talking about a lot of players walking out the door. right? I think we've said goodbye to Justin Britt. We've said goodbye to Mikey Potty, to DJ Fluker, to all of their defensive tackles.
Well, do you want a list of their free agents, their big ones?
Well, but hold on. Yeah, we can go through that in a second. But first of all, I haven't said goodbye to DJ Fluker. I know that came up for other folks. Fluker's under contract. I don't see a reason to get rid of him. I can maybe make the case. But if you're looking at Seattle's cap space and you're looking at where they can like really get some additional spending to shift their spend around, Britt jumps out like crazy. His actual number is 8.75. I'm saying 9, which in case someone's wondering. Then, I mean, you got to at least consider KJ Wright at $7.5 million. I don't think you do that because I don't know that you've got a better option for that price. But that's a big chunk of change. And then Ed Dixon, he's got to be out the door, $3.25 million. So between Dixon and Britt, you're talking about like 12 million cap space. Like that could be Jaron Reed. Like, I mean, I would much rather have one of those guys than both of those. If that makes any sense. But yeah, I mean, the Seahawks have, as far as I know, Evan, I don't know if you can check on that. I think they only have 42 players under contract. They have like one of the fewest number of, that's why they have all this cap space. So they got to fill a lot in this roster. But I mean, to your question to you, Nathan, I mean, do you want to see them go get names that you know and that are bigger, a couple, like, do you want to see them get 2 or 3 marquee free agents? Do you want to see them get one and really spread that spend as far as they can? I mean, how are you thinking about it?
No, I mean, I think that they can do both, right? I mean, they've got a ton of cap space. They need a ton of players. So like, they're probably going to, I hope they grab a big name at least. And they'll probably sign a lot of guys. It's just like, it's just a lot of turnover, and that's not a bad thing, right? It's just, there's 42 guys you said under contract, and then we're talking about cutting 3 or 4 more. Like it's just like a major chunk of the team that's going to be gone.
Yeah, I mean, they have 32 free agents.
Yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot of guys out the door.
And Malik Turner's one of them.
Yeah, but he'll be back.
He will. Yeah, there's some restricted guys in there.
He's got to, what did Marshawn say? He's got to not make up for last time. What was it? Turner's got some making up to do. That's all I'll say.
You know what is surprising to me that nobody has mentioned? Supposedly the most talented running back on the Seattle Seahawks is an unrestricted free agent. Did you guys know that? The most talented running back on the Seattle Seahawks is a free agent, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. I wonder why nobody's talking about it. Because he's not the most talented running back on the Seattle Seahawks.
No one has ever claimed that Robert Turbin is the most talented running back.
God damn it.
That was a good
I
save.
can't wait for them to bring him back. I can't wait for them to bring ProSize back.
I think we should all protect Jeff if they announce that they've re-signed Brandon Jackson.
Oh God. Oh, he's my least favorite Seahawk.
Why is that?
He's just like the definition of what's been wrong with their team the last 2-3 years on defense.
Tell me more.
He's just like a guy who wouldn't play for any other good team, and somehow the Seahawks are playing him like 40 snaps a game in the playoffs. And you look at like the Niners, like I don't even think he'd make the Niners practice squad. And you got this guy playing 40 fucking snaps a game, and he just keeps making the team every year with no redeemable qualities. I don't think he's good at anything. Run, pass. I just don't get it. Every year he just keeps making it, and this year, because of injuries, he was like one of their most important defensive linemen. Drove me nuts.
Amen, man. I think really, really, I'm so there with you on that. I would just, with this, so my general like roster philosophy is whether it's draft or free agency, go where the depth is. Like, especially if there's a match between where you need and where there's quality, don't just get one. Like, get 2, get 3, like remake your defense. Like, like the Packers did this offseason on their defensive line. They went too deep and they completely changed their pass rush. Like that was a strength of their team. Go do that. Like that, they can fix that. It's like they could literally fix that this offseason. Offensive line, they could set themselves up for the next few years. If they did nothing else this offseason other than fix their offensive and defensive line, do we think that that's a Super Bowl team?
I feel like a lot of teams become Super Bowl teams if you fix their offensive and defensive line stuff. Like, it's just, hey, we're just a quarterback away. Like, all right, well.
But we're not. We're not a quarterback away. Like, I mean, joking aside, that's a big difference, right? Like, I mean, so on the defensive line stuff, I know we talked about it a while, but Clowney, question. I mean, the guy's having sports hernia surgery. It seems like he might be the most expensive free agent on the market. Are you ready to go big dollars for Clowney to bring him back? Is that one of the? Would you rather them go in on him than Chris Jones and Ngakoue or one of these other guys out there?
I'm okay with paying him. I don't know. Like, assuming Chris Jones is what he's going, like, I don't know that Jones is actually going to get out on the market, but like, where would you rank him with Ngakoue, Robert Quinn, Chris Jones, some of these other guys that are going to be available? And especially considering a guy like Quinn is probably going to be considerably cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough one for me. Like, it is really, the reason I asked is because, I mean, my heart is, I really like the guy. I like him as a player. I like rooting for him. I like the type of player he is. I like his ceiling. I think he still does have defensive player of the year potential. I think everyone's like, he didn't have many sacks this year. I feel like if he had been healthy the last half of the season, I think he would have gone on a tear. And I think he would have had a big, big final end of the season. So my biggest question is this injury that he had, is it going to really limit him? Because there are some examples of sports hernia surgery, like really changing the trajectory of a player's career. So that's my only real question. If he hadn't had that, it wouldn't be a question.
Weeks 1 through 10, Pro Football Focus. So he got injured in week 11 against the 49ers. Weeks 1 through 10, Pro Football Focus graded Clowney as the league's 4th best edge defender. Just as a data point for you.
So is that a yes for you? Like, no hesitation?
That is no hesitation. Pay him $22.75 million a year right now. I think he's a blue chip player. You don't get many of them. And you just, I think having the opportunity to even retain him, I think it is a major blessing. Like, this is his first big contract. This is not, like a second big contract like we were discussing for Earl or something like that. Like, this is a pretty safe bet. I feel like he is a blue chip player. He has been a blue chip player for a very long time. He is elite. He was a game wrecker in year one of Pete Carroll's defense. Like, I think he's only going to get better, and I think they have to keep him in the fold.
He is not a blue chip pass rusher,
but he's like a top 10 pass rusher.
I heard Joe Fan called him on his podcast the most dominant 3-sack season he's ever seen.
That's true.
Well,
I thought it was a good way to sum up his season.
Yeah.
I mean, if you care about defeating the 49ers and beating the 49ers in football games, you have to shut down their run game. And he's probably the best run defender in the NFL. So
it's also a stretch to say that, I think. I don't know.
I don't know about that. He's like consistently ranked like 1 or 2 by Pro Football Focus and run.
Among edge defenders?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know. The pressures concern me.
They should. I think that's totally fair. But here's where it goes in my head is, if I close my eyes and I imagine a Seahawks like disruptive defensive line, I can totally see Clowney in there. Like, that's just not hard to like. As long as he's healthy, I think you can count on him being a really big part of that defense. That's the question. And then it's a matter of like, who do you add to him? Like I'm not as certain on some of these other guys, but like Eric Armstead, for example, is an interesting one that like deserves like he's a totally viable alternative and is younger and can play inside and outside, and doesn't have the injury issue. And it's like, and he probably will be cheaper. Like that's where I'm like, if we get Eric Armstead and Chris Jones, which Chris Jones probably not going to be available, but that's where I start to have a little more hesitation. So I have not gone through and done my real due diligence on ranking defensive linemen, but man, I mean, Shaq Lawson, Christian Covington,
Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, there's so many like quality guys.
Garrett.
If you bet wrong with Clowney and he just turns out to not be able to be healthier, his former self, that might be the death knell of competing for the next few years. That's a huge chunk of change. That's your second most expensive player on the roster. So I don't envy John Schneider and Pete Carroll in making this decision. I guess I'll kind of close. We'll start closing down here, but do you expect them to try to sign Clowney? Do you think that that's maybe one of their top priorities?
I think so. I don't know. One of the things that Pete called out was their issues on the edge. And Clowney, I don't think was a part of that. I think, he grades really well as a run stuffer. He checks out like eye test really well as a run stuffer. So I don't think he was a part of that, but there was a problem there. And he's not like the most disciplined player. So I would expect that they would, but part of me wonders just how hard and how committed they are going to be to get him.
How about you, Jeff?
I've gone back and forth in this last couple of weeks, and I think Clowney and his people are going to hit the market, and I think just the way Seattle historically do things, they'll put a number on him, and if he can exceed that number, I think they might just say, okay, we'll use that to get two other guys. But I think he is their priority. It sounds like they want him back. Sounds like they really enjoyed his experience, but I think Clowney's definitely going to hit the market. They agreed not to franchise him, and if he gets like $24 million offer or some 25 or something, I think that's it for him. I think they move on, and maybe you get a Quinn and someone like a Shaq Barrett instead. You're willing to pay for that guy. And I think no matter, even if you bring Clowney back, I think even if you sign Clowney, I think it's super important you get a second pass rusher, because I think for Clowney to work, you need to put people around him and you need speed rushers around him. So if you do sign him, I don't think just signing him will be enough. I think you have the same problems last year.
Yeah, like would you want to have, let's say you can get Clowney and Ngakoue, or you can get one of those two and then two guys like JPP and Quinn or Barrett or one of the other guys that are tier pass rusher. So you basically the question is, do you want two guys at like 20 million each, or do you want one guy at 20 million and two guys like 10-ish?
Well, that's the thing. Like you could actually go into like four guys, like 3 to 4 guys. Like you get 3 guys at 10 to 12 million, and then another guy. Like some of these guys are. Al Woods was a huge contributor this season. He was a $2 million player. Like you can absolutely get $2 to $4 million guys that are impact players for you. So, I mean, they don't have Jadeveon Clowney, Jaron Reed, Al Woods, Quentin Jefferson. Those are all gone, in their list. I think there might even be more. Brandon Jackson he was getting snaps, whether we like it or not.
Ansah.
And Ansah, that's right. So, I mean, they're going to need to – Brian Monet, he's gone too.
It's actually really fun looking at this list of edge guys. Like all these guys that we've talked about, and on Over the Cap, the guy that's at the very top because he made the most money last year, Ezekiel Ansah.
I know, oh God. It's so bad. So I mean, look, they're going to need to really add a lot of players. I could be excited about them going not quite bargain basement, but not top shelf shopping. It feels to me like you do need at least one premium guy on the defensive line. You know, maybe you don't. I mean, you can, but like it sure helps. And so, yeah, I mean, my general take is two of the good guys, two of the premium guys, and then fill in around them. But yeah, there's there's so many good players available. You know, if they could get 3 or 4 of them, I'm down with that too. All right. Well, we we're not going to cover the whole offseason this episode as much as like it's been fun actually, like getting back into this again. And I think what I definitely will promise is that I'm going to put, you know, pen to paper or finger to keyboard to write kind of my assessment of where needs and some of the offseason priorities or options are. You know, I don't know what your guys' schedule is. We'll work this out, but you know, I think there's enough to talk about. Maybe to have another show next week to kind of go through this in continuing detail. Off-season dates for the NFL. Basically, February 24th is when the scouting combine happens. So we've got a few weeks until I think we can focus on free agency for a little while and what's going on there. And then I think the draft will start to kick into high gear, and we'll cover a little bit more on that. So how's that sound to you guys?
That works for me.
All right. Jeff, we will hopefully see your lovely face. Your
Well, you don't prefer it this way.
Well, you look a little bit, I don't know, sideways smiling, maybe. So maybe it's a little bit appropriate, but we've appreciated your ingenuity to join so we could hear your thoughts. And for everyone who joined online, thank you guys for joining the show. We did not talk much about the Super Bowl. That's something we'll probably want to come back to next week. We
can't talk about San Francisco losing a little bit.
Do you want to say a couple things?
Yeah, I just think it's the most excited I've been after a Super Bowl, and this is the petty side of me, since the Seahawks won. And I'm still kind of excited. Like the thought of the Niners winning the Super Bowl in the last 6 minutes, I was just crushed. I was so looking forward to how much I would have had to avoid Twitter. And I think it's going to be hard for them to get back. I know you guys have talked about you think the Niners are going to be great for a while. I'm not sure I agree. I think the league is set up to take down teams like this, and the only way to sustain is great quarterback play. You saw it happen with the Rams. I think you're going to see things get a lot harder for them, and we don't know how good they are at quarterback. I think it's going to be a big challenge for them to make it back. I don't know if they ever will.
Yeah, I think I have more belief in their quarterback and their offensive coordinator than I did in the Rams. And I also just in the situation that I think the Rams were in terms of losing some really aging guys on the offensive line, like that, like some of the key pillars of how that team was working, and Gurley's injury. Like there's a lot of things that were working against the Rams where I think you could kind of predict them taking a step back. 49ers have a lot of young ascending guys, and I think they should be talented for a few years, for sure. But your points well taken, Jeff. And, you know, that might be the best that the 49ers was last year. That's possible. And wasn't enough. And so if I'm a 49ers fan, which I'm certainly not, I'm like pretty upset with the coaching because I think they had a talent advantage over every single team they played this year, and including the Super Bowl. And they didn't turn that in to a championship. So sucks to be them. All right, we'll talk about that more when we come back. Expect that we'll try to come back next week. I know Evan's traveling. I should be around. I've been traveling, so hopefully that'll help settle things down. And we've got a great offseason ahead, so hope to see all of you. I know some of you were joining the super chat and really appreciate that. Sorry we didn't get to take those questions, but thank you, Owen, and a bunch of the other folks that contributed on the super chat. If you haven't already, subscribe. Please, make a comment leave a comment on iTunes, a review, all those things, and sign up at patreon.com/hawkblogger. With all that aside, I'll say good night. Thank you for joining from all of us, including Andy Reid and his grandson. Have a wonderful evening. Cheers and go Hawks.